evening, everyone. Welcome to our Radon Education Public Information Forum. My name is Jenny Byford, and I'm with the Canadian Cancer Society. I work with the Society as an advocacy lead, so I help advocate for healthy public policies that can help prevent cancer or health policies that will help support those living with cancer. We're here today to talk about radon and reducing your exposure, and I think most of you either here tonight or watching us online have participated in the radon testing project on Vancouver Island, which was great. But if you haven't tested your home yet, this information will also be really valuable to you. Tonight we'll talk about, I'll speak a little bit about the health effects, and then, oops. Oh, I didn't turn it on. Sorry. There we go. Thanks. Tonight I'll talk about the health effects of radon, and then we'll switch it over to David Ennis with Radon Environmental, who will speak to how radon enters a home, testing for radon, how to reduce levels in your home, and then we'll switch it back and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of the Vancouver Island testing project. To talk a little bit about the Canadian Cancer Society, we are Canada's largest cancer charity. Our mission is to eradicate cancer and improve the lives of people living with cancer. To do so, we work in three main areas: in research, in support, and in prevention. We're the largest charitable funder of research in Canada, as well as we provide support programs such as lodges for those who have cancer and would like to need a place to stay while they're receiving treatment, or information, or peer-to-peer support programs. But the main focus of here tonight is prevention. And we know that about 50% of all cancers can be prevented, and radon is one of them. Let's skip ahead. So why is radon a health concern? Well, radon is the leading cause of lung cancer, only second to tobacco. We know that radon, when you're exposed to higher levels of radon over longer periods of time, it can increase your lifetime risk for developing cancer. So the lung cancer can take many years to develop. When you're exposed to radon, there are no acute symptoms, so you won't automatically start coughing if you know that you're exposed to radon. We know that radon is odorless, it's tasteless, it's invisible. You really don't know if you're being exposed to radon until you test for it. The impact of radon is a lot larger than a lot of people know. Health Canada estimates that radon is responsible for 16% of all lung cancer deaths. So that's about 3,300 lung cancer deaths in Canada each year. But the good news is that exposure to high levels of radon can be prevented. And so that's where David comes in. And we're going to talk a bit about building smart with radon mitigation. A little bit about David. David is a certified radon measurement and mitigation professional. So he's trained by the Canadian National Radon Proficiency Program. It's a little bit of a long title. Our acronym for it is CNRPP. But he knows how to measure radon professionally as well as how to reduce it, and will talk to us a bit more about that. David also works with Radon Environmental, and I will let him talk to you a bit more about Radon Environmental.
Well, thanks very much, Jenny, for that intro. And thanks, everybody, for coming out this evening. I know that many of you in the room here have participated in the current study right now, and we're quite excited to see the results of that study. They should start to roll in within the next month or two, and it'll be interesting to see. So as Jenny said, I'm with a company called Radon Environmental Management Corp. We're a privately held Vancouver-based company. We've been in business for just under 10 years now, and we're an environmental and building science firm that studies only radon gas. So we're the only company in North America that focuses only on radon gas. There's lots of other building and environmental science firms out there, but they do a myriad of things. They get involved in asbestos, they get involved in mold and all sorts of other abatement issues. And we get opportunities all the time and have over the course of the last 10 years to take on other things, and we stay true to our mission statement. Our mission is to reduce public exposure to radon, and we know that it's easy to do, and with continued education efforts, we can do that. I spend about 30% of my time on the education circuit. I do training for builders. Yesterday I was doing a training session for the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. I work throughout North America running training sessions, so it's a real pleasure to be here tonight and give you guys a bit of insight over radon. So this is a great slide. Can you hear me if I don't use the microphone? We're a small enough group. Anybody can't hear me? Okay, great. So this slide here, it's an American slide, but I like it because it really speaks to radon, to the awareness of radon. You can see in the US there's 21,000 deaths a year attributed to radon, which is much higher than drunk driving, falling in the home, drowning, and fires. Yet the awareness programs out there are much higher for, certainly home fires, drunk driving through the MAD program. We just don't seem to get the traction in terms of awareness. So it's starting to come, and to be honest with you, in the US, they're probably 30 years ahead of Canada in terms of awareness. There was a lot of awareness in Canada in the 1970s when they really discovered radon. It came to a head at Elliott Lake in Ontario. There was this extremely high incidence of lung cancer among the miners there. And by this time in the 70s, black lung, that was over. They knew to protect themselves from that. But they formed a royal commission in the 70s and did a bunch of studies on these miners with lung cancer and determined that it was the radon that was causing it. So there was a massive lawsuit. It was settled by the federal and provincial governments to the tune of about $100 million, 1975 dollars. And after that, there was a bit of an awareness program. But then the government changed and that all went away. So what is radon? It's a naturally occurring byproduct of the decay of uranium. So it's nobody's fault that we've got radon. And unfortunately today, as the building envelopes get tighter and tighter, we trap more of these soil gases inside the buildings. So I constantly have people come up to me and say, oh, I'm in a 100-year-old farmhouse. I must have lots of radon. And I look at them and smile and say, actually, you probably have less than your son in his brand new home, because your house, whether you know it or not, does a whole bunch of natural air changes, and that rids itself of radon. So basically what happens is, as uranium decays, it becomes radium, and then radium decays and it becomes radon. And it's actually the radon progeny that are the problem. It's not necessarily the radon itself. So radon's got a fairly long half-life in the nuclear field. It's 3.82 days. But once radon decays, it kicks off 2 alpha particles. So those alpha particles have a charge, and they float around this room, and they attach themselves to microscopic particles of dust. We breathe them in our lungs, and when the alpha particles strike and release their energy, it breaks the DNA chain in our lung. And our bodies are so smart, they rebuild that DNA chain. And every once in a while, it gets rebuilt in the wrong order. And that's the beginning of the cancer cell right there. So radon, you can look at this is an interesting little pie chart here. This is the amount of radon we're exposed to, background radiation, in our lifespan, and look at the large percentage of it that comes from radon. So the Health Canada guideline action level is set at 200 becquerels per meter cubed. And many of you are sitting here scratching your head going, what's a becquerel per meter cubed? And you're going to learn more about it as you get your results back. But that's the measure in Canada and everywhere in the world except the US, of course, that we use for radiation, or for radon levels. So what it means, 1 becquerel per meter cubed is 1 radioactive decay per second in a cubic meter of air. So for argument's sake, and I know this room's got a lot more than 100 cubic meters of air in it, but let's say it did. So at 200 becquerels per meter cubed, that would be 20,000 radioactive decays every second. And what that looks like, if you could see it at a microscopic level, it looks like a lightning storm. All kinds of little lightning strikes. It's really quite interesting to see. We have this ability to see it in a cloud chamber where we introduce radon into it, and we put dry ice and release the smoke, and you can actually see the flashes, and it's just crazy. So the World Health Organization has set the action level at 100 becquerels per meter cubed, so half what Health Canada says that us hardy Canadians can withstand. And they go on to say, but there's no level of radon to which human exposure is safe. The US limit is set at 4 picocuries per liter, which is their unit of measurement, and that translates into 150 becquerels per meter cubed. But the US, there's a big movement afoot right now to drop it, and I think we'll see later this year the EPA is going to knock it down to 100, or there's even talk of it going to 70 now. So, and at the end of the day, the risk of lung cancer is a multiplier of the quantity of exposure and the length of exposure. So here's the Canadian statistic here. In Canada, we have 20,800 lung cancer deaths a year, and roughly 16% of them are attributed to radon exposure. And I think personally it's probably a little higher than that, because if people smoke, they don't get added into that, that number there. And as Jenny's slide said earlier, if you're a heavy smoker and you live in a radon-rich environment, your odds go to 1 in 3 of getting lung cancer. So I wonder how many smokers get lung cancer that wouldn't have got it otherwise. So Health Canada reduced the action level, from 800 becquerels to 200 becquerels in 2007. So we were, again, a little bit late to the party, and I think that, you know, hopefully as time goes on, Health Canada will drop the Canadian action level as well. So health units and organizations like the Canadian Cancer Society across the country have really done a good job and are continuing to do a good job raising public awareness of radon. And I think the more we do that, the better it's going to be for everybody, and the safer it's going to be for everybody. There's been a bunch of schools tested across the province of BC. In the Interior Health Unit tested daycares, licensed daycares there. So we're starting to see a lot of action on testing, and hopefully we'll see some more action on mitigation. So the potential for high levels of radon infiltration can be challenging to evaluate prior to construction. Essentially, you can measure a brown dirt site before you build on it and try and determine if there's radon there. And we can determine accurately if there is radon there. But just because there is radon on a brown dirt site is no guarantee that you're going to have it in the building once the building's built. And if likewise, just because you don't see it in the brown dirt doesn't mean that in the excavation process, maybe a little blasting, you're not going to release radon. So, you know, we sell technology to test brown dirt sites, but I really, when I get calls for people to buy it, I really drill down and try and understand why they want to test, and essentially try and talk them out of it, unless it's a massive land transaction where there's other environmental issues going on.